This webinar series initiates or launches our new School of Trauma-Informed Care for Animals here at the Kerulos Center for Nonviolence. I'd first like to say a few things about what is trauma-informed care. In fact, what is trauma? Trauma is a kind of stress, and we experience stress every day, almost every minute. It's really, you can think about it as the differential between our comfort zone, both psychologically and physically, and the social and ecological settings that we find ourselves in. Now, every species and individual has developed a set of strategies and mechanisms for dealing with that differential, which, if it's too extreme, can be detrimental. So, for example, if you go outside and it's really cold, there are different ways in which you can accommodate that. You can put on a jacket, you can run around and get warm, or go back inside. From an emotional or psychological stress perspective, if, for example, if we have an argument with someone, or our boss yells at us, or we have anxiety about an exam, we have strategies and mechanisms for coping with that as well. We can, in the case of an argument, sit down with that individual, have a discussion, and reconcile the issues. With the exam, we take the exam, the anxiety dissipates. But when the stress becomes sustained and we can't escape it, that's chronic stress, it becomes deleterious. And when it becomes so extreme, so overwhelming, that is what we call trauma. And trauma can be psychological as well as physiological. So when we think about animals, then for the most part, the majority have suffered and sustained stress, high levels of stress, and trauma. And the reason that is in this modern humanity, the culture that we have created, the differential, the difference between how they would normally live in their habitat, in their social arrangement, social organization, in their food, etc., is radically different compared to what we have today in modernity. Now, we look at cases of domestic and farmed animals, cats, dogs, turkeys, fish. They live in an environment which is very different for the most part than their needs, even if they have co-evolved with humans. This is particularly the case when we look at the food industry. So chickens and turkeys and fish and other animals are confined. And really at the heart then of trauma is this notion of the lack of agency. And agency is the capacity and the right to be able to exercise one's own decisions about one's life, self-determination. Choose the individuals to socialize with, the kind of food, when and how we eat, etc., all aspects of our life. So in the food industry, in animals that are used in experimentation like chimpanzees, rats, and mice, even cats and dogs are really subjected to severe differentials in what they consider to be healthful mentally and physically, and the environments that they're subjected to. So then when we think about trauma-informed, really what we're talking about is disabling the aspects of the environment that cause the stress, that actually take away the agency from an individual. So when we're caring for trauma survivors, our role then is to inspire and revitalize and support that soul spark, that will, understanding, and desire to be in control and take initiative on one's own. So trauma-informed then is not just providing a nice place or good food or loving. Those are all very important. But a really important distinction then is less about the animal for whom we're caring than it is ourselves, who are the carers. So what that means is in order to support and to inspire agency in an individual in a safe environment so that they feel they can start to blossom and be themselves again without fear of any kind of harm or repercussion, then what that is when we're doing this is that it really is more about us than it is about the animal. So essentially, trauma-informed care, what we study and what we learn about it, is really directed at tuning ourselves as carers, tuning ourselves to be, as we say in our tagline, becoming who animals need us to be, specifically to the individual with whom we're working. So that requires a lot of different things. But one very important thing is work on ourselves so that we become an instrument that is perfectly tuned, or as best as we can, that really supports this individual's, the trauma survivor's, healing and ability to regain their agency again. So that means doing away with our own agendas and our projections, putting aside what we want the world to be, putting aside what we want that individual, the trauma survivor, the animal to be or do or feel, and just really be a listening organ, listening with all our senses and our heart for what that individual needs. So that's kind of a snapshot or back of the envelope description of what trauma-informed care is. And this webinar series, the first in many, we'll be hearing from 3 leaders in the field of traumatology. Actually, it's a much broader umbrella, but this notion of trauma is central. And that's because, unfortunately, we live in and are a large part of humanity has created a traumatogenic environment. So essentially, these lectures and these presentations are really about how can we best accommodate and create a space and place for individuals who are surviving from trauma. So these are going to be wonderful, stunning presentations that will give you just kind of a glimpse into this vast and deep field and help you understand how we can all become who animals need us to be. So enjoy, and thank you very much.